Hello, everybody. My name is Ivan Kaisan. I'm coming to you from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm one of the moderators in the film club, and the other moderators you may have already heard are Donna Murphy, Molly Zeff, and Ron McFarland. We're here, and hopefully you've already seen the movie, The First Step, and that's a documentary that follows Van Jones as he works across the aisle to pass a landmark bill on prison reform. If you're new to this film club, we do follow the Braver Angels format. When we speak one at a time in turns. The moderators will recognize you when you raise your hand. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, we're here to explain our views, not to convince anyone else to change their mind. So we want everyone to be respectful listeners, not to interrupt anyone, and just allow for a rich conversation. So our agenda for tonight, we are first going to be having a discussion with the film producer, Lance Kramer, and the moderators will be starting things off with our questions to Lance, and then we'll open it up to everybody else to ask your questions. Then we'll, in the remainder of the event, we will be discussing other questions about the movie and having a discussion among all of you. So I'll start with introducing Lance Kramer. We're very happy to have Lance. Every time we have someone who is from the film crew, we have a very enhanced discussion. Now, Lance Kramer is an award-winning filmmaker based in Washington, D.C. He was a co-founder of Meridian Hill Pictures. He produced The First Step and also another documentary, City of Trees, which is about a Washington, D.C. jobs training program. He also produced a Webby Award-winning documentary series called The Messy Truth, about a Braver Angels kind of subject, which is how to discuss difficult issues. And now, Ron McFarland, how about starting things off for the first question with Lance?
Yeah, how you doing, Lance?
Hey, good. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
All right, great to see you as well. I'm really excited to go through this movie. So the first question would, what inspired you to create such a documentary about criminal justice reform and the efforts to reduce mass incarceration? Man, that had to be a big one, and in the United States. And how did you go about it's a two-part question, researching the topic, you know? So yeah, it's, yeah. If you want me to repeat it, I can repeat it.
No, that's great. Yeah, again, thanks to all of you, Ron and Donna and Ivan, and for having me here. So the film, I guess officially you could say, or unofficially rather, you could say it started actually with that project that Ivan just mentioned, The Messy Truth.
Okay.
That was a independent web series that we made in the fall of 2016, before the 2016 election. Made it with Van. So if you go back and see it, I'll put a link in the chat. Anyone could see it. You could watch it for free online. Sadly, in some ways, even though it's 6-7 years ago, it doesn't really feel that dated, because it was really about the consequences of the polarization and toxicity around politics in the country, and how basically it was just, at least going back to that time, let alone now, so hard to even just have a conversation about the election or people's political positions or really anything that was proximate to the campaign. And I mentioned that project because it really was the source of inspiration for us. And the us was my brother and I, Brandon, who I work with. This growing divide, but also the inflammation around conversation, and inability to dialogue or discuss seemed to be almost anything, was of such deep concern to us, just on a human level, on a like just as a person in our families. We were seeing how that was having actually playing out with like breaks, where people were getting alienated within our family. And then also just being someone who grew up inside the Beltway and who have a strong belief in the democratic system and what all the institutions here and all the people who go to work every day with briefcases on the metro to serve the government, what this whole system is designed to do. And it really, at its best, and I think what really was of deep concern then was, if even just our basic ability to engage with one another was eroded, then it really has, the fear was that the ripple effects of that play out on things like issues that I care about deeply, like criminal justice, where it really does require dealing within the system to make change. And if you can't get people to the table to converse and dialogue and negotiate, compromise, work through these kinds of steps and processes, you actually can't change the systems that are playing an outsized role in people's suffering. And this was just something that was of deep concern to us. So we it started with us creating this web series that was really just a series of conversations that Van had with Trump supporting families in I don't think it's in my house. But it's the series started with Van just going to the homes of Trump supporting families and having these dialogues. That's really what that whole series was. And then on the other side of the 2016 election, Van, who we knew very well from having worked on 2 projects together, really did a lot of reflection and asked himself what kind of role did he want to play in this new reality of the new administration, and came to this clarity that no matter what happened, he was going to try to do anything he could to engage the administration on criminal justice reform and the addiction crisis, which were 2 issues that he's fought for most of his adult career. And we felt like telling a story about someone who was planning to engage in that way to try and get something done would be a critical narrative to tell, no matter what happened, and to be able to represent that with complexity and nuance. And we didn't know that there was no bill at that time. We didn't know certainly that it would pass or that people would come home or any of these things. It was really more of that kind of clarity that he had about his purpose, and then our desire to try and tell that story.
So just like the messy truth, where you were trying to get common ground, it was almost the same trail. Interesting. Well, I'm gonna move us along on this next question, and that has to do with how did you decide the type of individuals, like to interview, like politicians, people that were incarcerated, and what was the process, pretty much? What was the process of gaining access to the individuals, especially those in jail? In jail, I'm sure that was very difficult. So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it started with Van, and it started with our relationship with Van. So he was, our kind of entry point into the story. And then from there, most of the people that are in the film are people that he was encountering on his quest to try and get this bill passed or build the coalition. And so in a lot of cases, what we were doing was basically following his steps that he was taking. He moves at a very fast clip. So, he could be in West Virginia one day and then South Los Angeles the next, and then back in DC on a Friday. So we were kind of trying to keep pace with the kinds of relationships and conversations and work that he was leading himself. And then we were, it's kind of like as he and his team were trying to build this coalition and advocate for the bill, we were simultaneously trying to build relationships with people so that they would feel that they would trust us to participate in the film. So it wasn't automatic that just because Van was talking to Jared Kushner, that Jared Kushner would be in the movie.
Yeah.
So there was always, pretty much for anyone you see in this film, aside from Donald Trump, there was a series, not just one, but usually multiple conversations and time spent to get to know them without cameras, to explain to them who we are, what our intentions are, help them understand what the process would look like so that they could feel they could authentically trust us, that we weren't going to manipulate or, you know, be extractive with their stories. That was especially true in the case with the advocates from West Virginia and Los Angeles, where they weren't elected officials and they weren't, you know, household names, and frankly had been misrepresented in a lot of other forms of media. So there was a lot of understandable distrust. And then the other thing I'll say is that it was also important to us and to Van that the critics of the bill were represented fairly as well. So, you know, this was a very controversial thing that they were trying to accomplish. And we felt that for the film to have the kind of resonance that we hoped it would with audiences across the spectrum, you also had to represent that debate and the critics, and try to give as much legitimacy as we could to the people that disagreed with Van and team. So there was another process to build relationships with the people outside the team who were in opposition to the bill, but they cared about the issue. And that was something that was also really important to us.
Well, that's outstanding. I wish you could have had, you know how they do it in the movies or documentary, they could give the backstory.
The behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. That would have been interesting.
There were a lot of interesting conversations behind the scenes, I could tell you that.
I bet. Well, thank you, Lance. I'm gonna move you on to Ivan, and Ivan's gonna ask the next question. So, but thank you, Lance.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And it's just fascinating, Lance. I'm going to continue the thread about what happens as you're making this movie. I'm guessing that when you started the project, you had no idea if Van was going to be successful or not. Were you intending and committed to continue the film whether or not he's successful?
Yes and yes. So we had no idea that it would be successful. From the outset of the film, and literally until 2 days before even the bill passed, 2 or 3 days before the bill passed, there was still a question mark really until the very, very end, whether this was going to get across the finish line. I mean, that was a very turbulent time in American history. And, you know, you never knew what was going to be around the corner the next day. And in particular, I forget the exact day of the week that the bill was signed, but I think it was 2 or 3 days after the bill was signed into law, the longest government shutdown in American history started. That was December 2018. And so literally, had it not got signed into law that day, it never would have become a priority, certainly during the shutdown and then afterwards. So it was a razor's edge, you know, kind of finish. And we were having even conversations with our mentors and advisors about, at that time, like in November, December 2018, what happens if the bill fails? And, you know, how do we tell this story? Do we still have a movie even if the bill fails? And one thing I'll share that's like top of mind is that a close mentor I remember very vividly told me, you know, he asked me, well, do you remember how Rocky ends? Rocky 1? And I kind of said, well, yeah, he wins. He's like, no, wrong. Rocky loses in the first movie. I hadn't seen it for a long time, so I forgot. But but you know, it's almost like it can easily get seared into your brain that a movie like that has this kind of triumphant quality. But actually, he loses, and so it's really not a story about victory in the ring. It's a story about perseverance and and all these other qualities, you know, win, lose, or draw. And so I think that was very, having kind of examples like that, that were in our mind about the virtues of telling a story of attempt and of an attempt, almost irrespective of the outcome, but just to really understand and represent the attempt and the why behind people were fighting, why people were fighting for something that mattered so much. That really became a driving force for us. And we said to ourselves, look, like if they win, then there'll certainly be a reason to tell the story. If the bill fails, there'll hopefully be lessons to learn about why. And then even in the course of a victory, as you see in the film, it wasn't like everyone thought it was good that this bill was passed, and there was still tension on the other side of the victory. And so even that then became something we felt was really important to represent, that there could be complexity around a victory because of the political climate.
Oh, thanks a lot for that. It's a question I've always had about documentaries and how things go, where the financing goes, whether it's secure at the start and all the way going to the finish.
It's really, really hard.
Like
you have to like somehow convince people that there's going to be a story before there is one. Very, very hard to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have Donna continue the conversation.
Okay, so in order to move this along so that viewers will get to ask some more questions, I'm going to say something as a statement that I was going to ask as a question. But just so that you all know, in 2021, it turns out after they finished making this film, just after they finished it, Jeff Bezos gave Van Jones $100 million to be spent on charitable causes. So that's pretty amazing. And Van has been working on ways in order to do that. So my question then to you, Lance, is what do you hope viewers take away from watching this documentary?
Sure. So, you know, I think that it's a few things, and I'm actually more interested in what you all took away. So I don't want to, I'll tell you what I hope, but I'm more interested, I think, in a sense, in what you all took away. I hope that the importance of how do I want to put this? Hope people walk away with a sense of greater understanding and greater recognition of just the power of our shared humanity as it relates to these really entrenched, huge issues that are impacting communities, and how many of these problems now are just so, like the broken criminal justice system, are so expansive that they touch all corners of the country in all kinds of ways. And the only way to even begin to chip away, in my opinion, at these issues and build some sort of better future is to be able to recognize some sort of shared humanity in each other's lived experience, particularly in recognizing people's pain. And unfortunately, in a sense, the power that recognition of our respective pain can be a point of commonality that can lead to some progress. And so I hope that, you know, there's a way that people can watch the film and open up their heart, and if nothing else, maybe walk in someone else's shoes and you know, have some empathy for the way that the country's not working for them the way it should, and feel some sense of responsibility about how to take part in whatever sort of process or fight it might take to make it better. Particularly with criminal justice, it's a huge, huge issue. If you haven't been directly impacted, it may not be something that's front and center on your mind, but the second that you unfortunately could be impacted, it will just take over your life or your family's life. And my hope is that for those people who haven't been impacted, they can recognize just how detrimental the system has been to those who have been impacted and feel some sense of connectivity or proximity, and do everything that they can to make sure that ultimately their families aren't impacted as well. And I hope, there's a lot more I could say, but there's a lot more work to be done. And there's a lot of cynicism in the world. There's a lot of also even just mystery about how you get a bill passed, whether it's in the federal system or in your state, state house. And I hope that the film can offer maybe some inspiration, but at least maybe a little blueprint into one way to go about passing bills that can change people's lives. It's not the only way, but it is a way.
Yeah, so the film certainly did get into how to get a bill passed, i.e. through a lot of compromise. A lot of people getting maybe less than they wanted, but they got something, and there's a great amount of compromise and working together to achieve it. So Molly, I'm going to have you ask the last question that we have of Lance, and then maybe you can lead the calling on folks who want to ask Lance a question. Molly, you there? Oh, Molly. Huh. Okay, I don't know what happened to Molly. Let's see what the last question.
Let's see. Molly put something in the chat, but I think that was the question we just talked through.
Okay, well, the question that Molly was going to ask was what were some of, and we'll ask you to keep this short, Lance, because we do want to get on to other questions. What were some, name an inspiring moment for you during the making of this film? I'm sure there were many inspiring moments.
There's a lot of them, but I'll just pick one. Was just when we witnessed the first people that at least we met who were coming home. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, there's whatever, you can get into all the machinations of passing a bill, all the conversations and all the everything. But at the end of the day, when you actually just saw, when I saw with my own eyes that a human being that had been in a prison because of the passage of a bill was now walking out of a courthouse back to their family, again, because of the past, before because of the passage of a bad bill, now as the passage of a better bill, they're reunited with their family. That was something that I'll never, ever, ever forget. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, you could be right there as it happened. I can understand. Yeah. Great. Okay, well, so now is your chance, dear viewers and attendees, to ask Lance a question. So if you want to ask him a question, please raise your electronic hand that's on the bottom of your Zoom screen and go for it. Okay, so we have Len Breslau. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I remember seeing on C-SPAN and was surprised to hear on C-SPAN Donald Trump in one of the episodes or shows, let's say, he was being briefed by his staff about First Step, and very low-key, business-like. And then another time on C-SPAN, there were governors, Republican governors, maybe talking about other things they were working on, including First Step, and very low-key. Trump would comment on it. And I believe this was happening before the bill was passed, so that, given that presidents these days exercise greater power than they have in the past, he was going ahead with some form of First Step, program. It seemed to be primarily at this point to rehabilitate people or help them get integrated in society once they got out. So I'm wondering if that's correct, my impression, if that was all before the bill was passed. And that, if so, that, I don't know, makes Donald Trump, I must confess I'm no fan of him on the whole, but it makes him seem like he was more behind this whole program than it seems from the film, if you see what I mean.
That's a good question. And I don't know I don't know exactly which meetings or, panels you're speaking of specifically, but just generally speaking, I think that, look, I hope I'm not breaking news here, that when Donald Trump, came down the escalator in Trump Tower to announce his candidacy, and then certainly a lot of the messaging during the campaign, at least even pre-election, was very focused on law and order. He didn't get into the White House on a platform of compassionate release for people who had been unjustly incarcerated due to racial discrimination or anything of the such. Like, that was not the platform that he built his coalition on to get to the White House. This is my view, but I think there's like a lot of data to back that up. So the process of getting from that point where he walked into the White House on an American Nightmare and Law and Order platform to signing, what ultimately was landmark criminal justice reform, like once in a generation, was, I think, largely due to the advocates who got in his ear or who sat at the table and made their case. And they were effective. And I think it's like a testament to me, just as much, at the end of the day, any bill that gets passed, president has to sign it. But there's so many competing priorities. And I think that what was effective, truly effective about the advocates was that they not only were fighting for their cause, but they took the meetings and they kind of took the shot, where actually a lot of people on the left were not, as you see in the film, engaging. And so, and it wasn't automatic, it wasn't overnight. He vacillated more times than we've represented in the film. But it was people, my view, and what I hope comes through in the film, is that the people who were in many cases directly impacted themselves, including Jared Kushner, whose father went to prison, were really the people that mobilized and helped him to see that this was something that was worth passing. He even, for a brief moment, was campaigning on this issue. And if you go back on, I'm sure you could find it online, the Super Bowl, he ran a Super Bowl ad in 2020 that had Miss Alice Marie Johnson, who was one of the people who he had offered clemency to, who came home. And they talked about the First Step Act. So literally he had a criminal justice reform ad ran during the Super Bowl as part of his 2020 campaign. And 2 months later, when COVID hit, that you never heard anything else about, you almost never heard anything else about this issue. So it was a constant, it was also just a constantly in flux. I feel like I can't tell you what Donald Trump ultimately wants or believes in, or his strategy. I feel like we tried to think about that many, many times, and I'm no better than anyone else being able to predict that or understand it. So I think we just tried to also, at the end of the day, just represent what we saw as what happened, and maybe leave some room for people to have their own theories too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question a little bit.
So this is great. I want to make sure we have time for the general discussion. So I'm just going to say, Lance, we love hearing from you. And also, if you are able to keep your own answers for the next few, at least to 1 or 2 minutes, I'll let you know if it's been a minute or two when it passes by.
Sure.
And I can take over for calling people too, just because usually we do that. So you don't need to, you don't have to. So I'm going to now call on Michael. Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lance, for being here, and everybody at Braver Angels for hosting this. This is my first film discussion, so it's definitely an amazing one to start off with. But I was curious, throughout the film, you kind of see throughout Van's career the vitriol and the the negativity from both liberals and conservatives that excuse me, that he's faced, and he learns how to develop a thick skin and clearly resiliency around that, and kind of a hard-headed focus on you know, the task at hand. And I'm curious if during like the fact that there was a film, the fact that he, you know, was dealing with the pressure of trying to pass this bill and everything around it, and then on top of that, you know, having to have cameras follow him around. Like, I'm curious what like the most tumultuous moments were with that for him and for everybody involved in the film, because, you know, I had anxiety the entire film because you know, it's just that stressful. And so I'm curious what it was like on the inside.
Yeah, I'll try to I'll try to keep my answer brief. Yeah, I mean, that anxiety that you felt, and my apologies for making you anxious for 90 minutes, but you know,
It's a good anxiety.
we were feeling that constantly, even just being witnesses to it all. So that was like there in the room for Van, for Lewis, for everyone was feeling it. So in a sense, we felt like we had to represent it somehow in the film. I know it's uncomfortable, but that just felt important to us. For Van, it was a brutalizing experience for him. I think there's so many different dimensions that were extremely hard for him, but I think the two that he would probably say, I mean, he would say, because I've heard him say it, that were the hardest for him was that his marriage was falling apart and he was losing his mother at the same time that he was trying to pass this bill, which was the biggest thing he had tried to accomplish in his career. So I think it was, you know, it was like the intersection of the personal and the political, and the familial just like coming to a complete head, and also trying to do something that helped people and bring people together, and finding that a consequence of that in that environment was that he became increasingly isolated, was something that compounded it, because he was going through something tremendously difficult and more alone than he had ever felt.
Wow.
So that's that. I hope that in a sense that's, you know, comes through in the film, but that's what we were witnessing behind the scenes, and we talked about it really openly too with him. He felt it was important to be in the film.
Yeah, that was really felt. So commend you for showing all sides of it.
Thanks. Thanks.
That is also just incredibly tough. That sounds really hard for him, and probably for people around him trying to support him. So thank you, Lance, for sharing the more of the human side there too. All right, Hale Powell, you are up. Feel free to unmute yourself go for it.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for the opportunity here. I want to talk about, well, first of all, I think the film was very impressive. You know, I know the critics, you know, some of the critics kind of thought it was excessively self-promotional for Van Jones, but I thought it was very impressive that you guys included such a strong presence of his critics from the left. I thought that really gave a lot of credibility to, as you say, his aloneness and kind of his fortitude pushing this forward, and made him feel isolated. But I guess my question now is, it's an effective documentary. How is it going to be promoted? I know, at least I saw on the web that it's going to be released or has been released to theaters. I know virtually nothing about promotions of films or documentaries, but it is an important message. And I wonder if there is a plan to promote it on a larger scale.
Yeah, thank you for that, the question. I think that in some ways, like, the promotion at this stage is really on like people such as yourselves. in a sense. Like the engine of the promotion has also been very grassroots this whole time. It's an independent film. We don't have a big company like a Netflix or a Hulu or whoever behind the film. So it's been the whole way kind of very independent and grassroots driven. We tried, and I won't bore you with all the details, but we had many rejections that from probably all the kinds of places that you might be familiar with or have subscriptions with. They did not get behind the film. So a lot of and really the whole approach that we've taken, whether it was taking it to film festivals or this theatrical release, or even getting it onto Amazon. Now it's on Amazon and people can see it at home, but it's really through this kind of almost semi self-distribution space that Amazon has created. And so, you know, we've tried to do everything we can as independents to make the film accessible, to partner with people that are advocating for the work, or, you know, running organizations such as your own to spread the word. I'd love to see it hit a bigger scale than it has. Also, just kind of doing everything we can, and we frankly can use the help. So, you know, spreading the word, you know, word of mouth also is hugely important. And we want to make sure, I think, you know, beyond even the numbers, I think that what we're really concerned with is it getting to kind of like the right spaces? So for people that can convene or watch it and engage with it meaningfully, and for it to have an application, you know, in the world in meaningful ways. I think at the end of the day, I wish that millions of people could see it, but if they can't, but it can just be shared in meaningful spaces, I think we'll be really happy.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And congratulations on getting it on Amazon. That's not a small feat, I'm sure. And you tried at least. It's important to keep trying on all those. Michelle, you're up, and then Mike, you'll be our last person for this section.
Thank you. I did enjoy the film immensely, and I really appreciate that Michael brought up the emotional side. I certainly also felt Van's pain and just everything he was going through. But in the spirit of Braver Angels, I wanted to talk more about the people who came together in an urban center on the west side and a rural center on the east side of our country, and ask you a little bit about them. I'm wondering how you decide if they get an opportunity to opt out of things being on the film, or if you choose someone who just tells their story better, or how that works. I really felt like I was watching personal growth in Tylo, I believe is her name. And the Eastern gentleman, the tall gray-haired man with the mustache, you know, I teared up when he said, "I will go to the West and walk with you, or stand shoulder to shoulder." I just thought that really watching those people grow while in this 90 minutes, which was a lot longer, obviously, that you spent time with them. So I'm wondering how you decided how they mold their stories, if they choose what gets in the film, or how that works.
Sure. No, I love that question. Just to keep things, there's so much I could say about the group. I'll try to keep it brief. We made a agreement with every person who was not an elected official who participated in the film, that they would have a chance to see the film before it was finished. And that part of our responsibility to them for participating was that they had to, in a sense, give the film their blessing before it was released into the world, or even completed. It didn't mean that they were watching successive cuts and all of that. We felt like that's our responsibility as the filmmakers, to shape the story as we saw best fit and get it to a point where we felt like we were putting our best foot forward and representing them as well as we could. But at the end of the day, we weren't going to release a film into the world that they had not blessed and said that they felt well represented. And so we did that with all 10 of the people in individual screenings. Like we sat down with each of the 10 people, also with Lewis and Jessica and a few others, and screened the film with them to make sure that they felt like the choices that we had made about what to include, felt good to them. And so we got that blessing from everyone. There was a few very small things that changed after we did those sharings, but probably 98% stayed the same. There's a lot, one of the heartbreaking things about making the films, there's a lot we had left out, mostly because of time. So there's just incredible connections and experiences that they had together. But I hope what we included gave you a taste of what they're like as people, and also the kind of growth, like you said, or transformation that they experience, which is not an exaggeration. Those are that, like what you just said is what we witnessed through our own eyes.
That is awesome. Just awesome, Lance. Thank you. I'm with Ron. I think, like Ron mentioned earlier, it'd be great if you could have one of those whole sections at the end of a film, with all the outtakes. I really hope that you'll make something like that. And then when you get your big distribution, you can include that piece at the end. That'd be great. Okay, Mike, take us home with the last one in this section, and then we'll actually move to our usual format of asking questions to the whole broader group, and we'll all get a chance to answer together. So go for it, Mike.
Okay, so hi, Lance. I thought it was a very well-made documentary, and it was entertaining. So congratulations on that. I had a question about the statistics and the numbers that anyone can go look at in terms of incarceration rates and countries that keep people in prison. I mean, I'm sure you obviously you've seen them, and hopefully everyone on this call has. I mean, they're staggering when you look at the United States, the amount of people we put in prison versus other countries, and the rate of incarceration. I'm surprised that you didn't mention that or hone in on that more. I remember one instance where someone mentioned that we lock more people up than any other country. You talked about trying to appeal to people's emotions. Some people, they might live in an area where there's a lot of crime, or they might have been, them or their family might have been affected by crime. And, the last thing they want to hear is, compassion toward prisoners. But if you look at those statistics, there's obviously something wrong. People who say lock more people up, well, we are locking more people up and it's not working. So I'm just curious, was there a decision not to talk about or show the statistics more? Did you think it would detract from the documentary? Because I do think that they are very important and they tell a story.
No, I mean, I agree with you. The statistics are critical. I mean, the statistics are a conglomeration of all these individual experiences and lives that have been, impacted. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that what we ultimately determined, and we had 34 drafts of the film. So version 34 over the course of 2 years of editing was the one that stuck. And I think what we ultimately decided as a team was that the human stories on that personal level were the contribution that we could make to this conversation. And there were earlier versions of the film that told the more meta story, even got into, well, how did we get here? And, kind of zoomed out, and it didn't work in the ways that we hoped. And it didn't feel like that was our unique contribution that we could offer based on who we were as filmmakers, the story that we had access to. And so, for better or for worse, that was what we focused on, what we felt the contribution that we could do best, we could make best. And, in a sense, I think my hope is that the statistics that we did leave in the film, resonate maybe, or there's it's like, if you could only take one thing away, one data point away, or two, what might you take away? And in the end, those two statistics that we put in were, in a sense, to us, the most significant ones. And they're also a paradox. So you could have 10,000 people, 10,000 human beings. Now it's about 25,000, film's 2 years old, who could come home and have their lives transformed. And it could seem like a huge accomplishment, landmark criminal justice reform, and also still have 2+ million people still incarcerated and feel like, oh my God, by the numbers, this is almost a drop in the bucket. And two things could be true. And, you know, I think that was, we had a lot of robust conversation around it as a team. That's ultimately where we landed. But I certainly know that, you know, that is, in a sense, you could say a shortcoming of the film is that it doesn't touch on all these other data points. I hope others pick up pick that up and contribute also.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you can never do it all. And also, it's only an hour and a half. I can't even imagine editing down to that with all the footage you must have had to cut. That had to be painful. I hear you. Thank you, Mike, for that question. All right, well, we're going to move on to the open big part of our discussion. So as usual, still press the hand raising function. And this is where anybody can answer our questions. So Ron, take it away.
Yeah, back, you guys take a look. I did have some information about the incarceration rate in there. I didn't put the numbers, but after I asked this question, I'll put them in. It's interesting. What moments, people, or ideas resonated with you while you watched this film? And this is for everybody. What resonated? You know, the people, the ideas, anything that stuck out. You know, this is an open question anyway. Yeah. What resonated to you? Besides Donald Trump, you know, what resonated? Oh, Michael. Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, there was one moment in the film where Van was like, he was like at his apartment or whatever, like after he got divorced, and he was like, you know, people ask me who my friends are, and he like looks at his bookshelf and he's like, these are all of my friends, and he was like, there, you know, there's no replacement for the amount of books that I've read and how widely I've read, like reading books from people with opposing ideas and people who don't agree with me. Like that's formulated his opinions on how to really mobilize a coalition. And, you know, I think it's pretty apparent in the film how his approach differs from the other liberal groups like Black Lives Matter in the film, who, like, you know, their co-founder was like, I explicitly don't reach out to conservatives, and, you know, like, I don't want to make an argument one is better or one is working more than the other, but I think that distinction is interesting, and how foundational that approach has been and how core it is to who Van is as a person. I think it's something that we, you know, at least for me, like really was a profound moment. And I think, yeah, it just landed really well. That idea of trying to appeal to the human being first, and having the courage to, you know, kind of give people the benefit of the doubt. Like he was, you know, giving an olive branch, I feel like, to everybody in the film. And so that definitely stuck with me.
All right, thank you, Mike. That was a great observation. You know, because sometimes I do that. I'm like, oh, the only person is these books. So that's good. That's good. Kayleen, is it Kayleen? Hopefully I'm not tearing your name up, but is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
I get some.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a unique one.
Yeah, I know.
Well, for me, yeah, what just was powerful, and I guess, you know, this is for you too, Lance, was just, it stood out the humanness and the humanity, and that is the path forward, and just how hard Van fought for that, and just, the question that I don't get to ask, right? I'm not trying to ask a question, but just am I wondering, the group of the people from the West and the, LA, and just the intentionality that went to, the work to even getting that group together. Like, I'm a therapist. You don't just, to create that trust and that, and just, I guess the whole film, like them and the, the people supporting and opposing on both sides, just senators and just, people, just how much pain and fear. I just saw so much pain and fear. And just even, I think it was the first time the senators, I just saw them as human beings with like a story and a narrative, and also with pain and fear. And it's like, that we're afraid of each other. We're afraid of each other. And it just is like, oh no, they're dangerous. And just the work to humanize each other and find common ground really stood out to me, was encouraging.
Thank you for the observation, because it, just like what Braver Angels does, they try to come with some type of common ground. And it is difficult because it takes, like, I was a former coach, and it takes reps. You got to practice it, and it's not a natural thing. So, but thank you for that comment. Michelle, how you doing there? Michelle, you're up.
I'm good, thank you. Just 3 takeaways again after Van's pain that really stood out for me. But 3 other takeaways were just that to have real empathy, you need exposure. And I think that that's what this East-West crossover did. It exposed them and kind of opened their eyes. And I see that in my own circle. If you've never been exposed, it's easy to misunderstand and have all these preconceived notions. The second thing was we need to be comfortable, maybe not happy with, but comfortable with incremental change. All these holdouts who are holding out for the perfect, getting in the way of the good, or whatever that quote is. I think just being comfortable with incremental change is required. And then also the different roles we play. The conversation between, and I've forgotten her name, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, and Van at the end. And when she tells him, I can't go meet with them. And she's not angry. She's not being a talking head, hate, a lot of hate language, but she's saying, I can't. And because she gets to stand on principle and fight in other ways, she also says, but we have to send somebody. And in the background or somewhere, we all understand that. Like, we don't have to hate each other, badmouth each other. I'm going to be the person who stands on principle and does these things, and you can be the person who does some crossover stuff. And I thought that was really important to acknowledge and recognize in any cause we get involved in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. How about you, Luke? Thank you. Luke?
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
So I guess revealing my bias, I kind of appreciated seeing Trump in a light that wasn't totally incendiary. But the film, I'm just really blown away by the bravery, Lance, that you and Van and everybody persisted for so long to make something really, to take a risk and try to do something wonderful and be an example of what's possible for everyone. So yeah, just find it very inspiring. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Quick and simple, huh, Luke? There you go. Cool hand Luke, I'll tell you that. All right. Hale, how about you? Yeah, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah,
on
there
mute.
you go.
There
Okay.
You go. Yeah.
Okay. My takeaway is that Vance is Van is a kind of an extraordinary and unique individual, and has the social and interpersonal skills to navigate a pretty perilous path, and doesn't have he doesn't have kind of the tendency to have a visceral response to people who disagree with him. That's an important skill to have that unfortunately most of us don't have. and what strikes me are two things as a result of that. I mean, that's really a limitation, kind of a human limitation on the possibility of having this kind of dialogue, because so few people have that sort of social capability. And secondly, that maybe if you think about Braver Angels, maybe that's the sort of skill set that Braver Angels could focus on, is, or maybe already is focusing on that ability, and growing that ability to be able to communicate without being reactive, and learning how to listen more, and, like somebody said earlier, feeling people's pain. But as it is now, Van is, 1 out of a million in terms of that capability. And somehow, if we're going to be able to navigate the same path that he did, we need to expand the number of people who are capable of that.
Thank you. It's kind of like what Brave Rangers does the LAP skills, LAPP. I always thought they should put another P right in the middle, ponder, before you open up your mouth. So that would be great. All right. Next is Lynn, and then the final on this will be Donna on this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say something briefly that, I think I think it's the woman from Black Lives Matter had so much ambivalence about everything because of how differently these more recent, mostly white addicts were being treated or being viewed than the mostly African-American addicts, back in the 90s with the crack cocaine epidemic. The approach, even by Democrats under Clinton, was to incarcerate, and now it's being viewed as a mental illness or a health problem. And so she naturally had a lot of ambivalence, that was said in the film, but I don't think anyone's said it here today. I think that's worth mentioning.
All right. Thank you.
I really appreciate her ambivalence.
All right. Oh, a positive. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
All right. It's almost like, are you saying we are enemies? We are not enemies, but friends? I mean, I'm just messing with you. That's what Lincoln said,
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. How about you, Donna? And then you be the last one on this question.
Yeah, just really quickly, this obviously could not have happened with Vance Jones, but I want to credit another person who was, it seemed to me very important that he was in the position he was, which is Jared Kushner. His father had been in prison, and he had obviously visited his dad in prison and seen what goes on there. And he took a personal interest. And because he was right by Donald Trump, most of the time, he was able to provide, I think, an important influence that helped to get this legislation passed. So I want to credit Jared Kushner as well.
All right. Thank you. Super. Okay, the next question, I guess Ron's asking the next question. Ooh, I feel worthy. Here we go. This next question is about resilience. What examples did you of resilience did you see in the documentary? Take a moment to marinate on that one. Resilience, and that could be from someone incarcerated to someone like that was in the process, from the 2 different cities. Yeah, that. Resilience. Oh, we don't have any takers yet. Oh, boy.
I would say, this is Hale, I would say that everybody in the film showed some form of resilience, even the filmmaker. Because this was not an easy process, 34 different edits, versions, and people across the board in the film had suffered and struggled and, found opposition and persisted through opposition. So, obviously Van Jones was, the main character, but I think across the board, everybody, this was a difficult project, a difficult experience for everyone in the film.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that's remarkable about it.
All right. Okay. That's there. Yeah, you covered all the bases. Thank you. So the next question is, what did the First Step documentary say about America's political polarization? What did it say about America's political? I feel like I'm on Jeopardy. The political polarization. And I'll go dun 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 dun. Here we go. Yeah, what do you think about that? It was so the polarization was kind of obvious, but what do you guys think about it? I think Kayleen pointed out earlier about how difficult it was, like like the lady, I think it was a lady in Black Lives Matter, or was it the one in Virginia? She was struggling with wanting to go to Washington and then support the bill, but it would have meant supporting the man, Donald Trump. But what do you think about that? The political polarization? There you go. I set the trap. There she is. Go ahead,
No,
speak.
I saw somebody else. Michael had his hand up. But
Michael? Okay.
You go. I got
Okay.
shy.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I guess, yeah, just that highlight that we're afraid of each other. I've been on my depolarizing journey since 2016, and I just now found y'all, and I don't know how I didn't find you sooner. I'm so excited. If you voted for this person, it means this, or like, how can you be this person and vote for this person, or how can you support this thing? And it means, you're against this or you're for this, and just me having to like flip the script, like flip it and kind of point the finger back at me and just realize, so I think even some of the people from the LA and West Virginia were like, you feel this way about me, or you voted for this, and that's not exactly true. And I think I saw that we're all in our pain and our fear, and so like self-focused and so focused on our own, that it makes us like reactive and protective, and like not see the pain and fear of other people and their shared humanity and like connection. And just that, like her, like I can't, but that was the path. That's the path, is like being brave and crossing that. And it's really painful and scary. And but yeah, we don't want to do it. It feels really good to hate people. It feels really good to like blame someone or a group of people. And it's really hard to, kind of flip the script, or
it is.
See humanity in people when you're in pain and you're afraid.
Thank you for that. And since Lance has his hands up, how are you doing, Lance?
I love to listen I love listening to all of you. So I can be very brief here, but I just wanted to say that on the point of, or the question of polarization, the anecdote I wanted to share is just that, in the last 18 months, we've shared the film now in over about 125 different in-person screenings in almost 40 different states. Some have been very red spaces, some have been very, very blue spaces, some have been split down the middle, very urban, very rural, suburban, prisons,
churches, I mean, it's been a very vast range of settings and community demographics and political persuasions. It's the same movie.
Yeah.
There's not like versions that we've
Right.
adapted for each of those. It's the same movie.
Right.
And so I just share that I think there's a, you know, in the conversation on polarization, there's often a kind of parallel conversation about, oh, well, everyone is only just getting their own type of information or media or stories or narratives. And also the exposure to the kinds of stories that we're getting is fragmented as well. And
Right.
almost to the point where it would lead you to think we can't have narratives that move through spaces.
Yeah.
And our own little limited experience has proven that you can have stories that, or media that can move through different spaces and be accepted and embraced. I hope that that's something maybe to just kind of ponder as well.
Yeah. Oh, you like the word ponder. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that word ponder. Yeah.
So it goes with listening, acknowledge, pivot. And I like to throw in ponder and then give your perspective, you know. That's just a skill that we use with Braver Angels. So anyway, but sometimes we only get to listen briefly and then all the way to perspective. And that's where the emotions come up. Okay, Michael. And you'll be the last one, and then Ivan will be up next. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be. I'll try to be brief. Yeah, I think the first when you said political polarization, the first thing that came to mind was that interaction between. I'm failing to remember his name now. The person on Van's team who was a former inmate, who's now a counselor.
Yeah. I remember him. Yeah.
Incredibly inspiring, impressive guy. But when he was interacting with the attorney general or someone, and he was like, the guy was like, "Oh, I want to see your pre-sentencing report," and like just offering no humanity, like just, he saw him as this, I don't know, demon or villainous guy who got sent to prison and doesn't deserve redemption. And the Tom Cotton, that his whole rhetoric was around that as well. And I think that's kind of the degree to which most people perceive an issue like this playing out, is like, okay, everyone who's conservative is like those two figures. And then you come to realize during the film that, like somebody mentioned earlier, that interaction between the community organizer from LA, and I can't remember where the other guy was from, but like a Trump supporter who was like understanding and empathetic to the cause. And I think like so many people vote out of ignorance and fear. And so a lot of people from the opposite side, by the way somebody votes, makes a characterization of them, as opposed to realizing like, that person might have voted for that person because they felt like Hillary Clinton was just as, unrepresentative of like the common good or whatever, or, like that's what all their friends are doing. Like that's what all the, their family is doing. And just to peel that back and realize that like the political system is designed to make people antagonistic and tribal. And if you're able to peel that back and have the have the human conversations, like the ones in this film, where it's not about the politics, it's about the people.
Yeah, Michael, I've been pondering every word you were saying. I was about ready to interrupt you, and then you came like Superman.
Please do. Please do.
You put it all together, and because we have to ponder and we have to look at it, and you're told, I agree with that. Sometimes we do become tribal, but that goes to that book, The Righteous Mind, that I've been reading like 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And we have these moral foundations. And so Yeah, it's incredible. I said that Michael's going to be the last one, but Lynn, you have a smile. If you can keep it brief, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I have a question for everyone. A conservative friend of mine during the Trump administration said that the First Step Act wasn't, the passage of it wasn't published in the Main Street media. So, you know, there's no time for all of you to respond, but you can respond internally to yourselves. If that's true for you, that you didn't hear about it, or maybe you didn't even hear about it until you saw this film. So it's just a question to throw out for you to think of.
Okay, thank you for that question. Everybody ponder on it. And if you have an answer, put it in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll say, yeah, yes, no, maybe, you know. All right, Ivan, you're up.
All right, thanks, Ron. Yeah, we're winding down very quickly now. So hopefully I will ask you to keep your responses brief. My question is about a criticism of this film. It's been said that the documentary is self-serving and a vanity project for Van Jones. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with that? Did it bother you that it featured so much of Van Jones? Oh, Ron, go ahead.
Oh, I love Van Jones, so it didn't bother me at all. But I did a little bit my homework on that organization, and as far as that money that was given to that charity, I don't think they've spent it yet or put it to use yet, but I'm not. It's called the Dream Corps, I think it is. And, but, it goes back to, I'm looking at what Van Jones was working so hard on the policy that I didn't even look at him. Even though I'm not a big fan, I looked at his cause. And that would be the same way if I wasn't a fan of Trump's. And even though it took him a while to, the sign and everything, but you got to go with the process. And sometime in the past, I would have blind allegiance and not follow a particular person because I didn't like them, their personality. But man, I tell you what, that law was, that was when they did a lot of that stuff in the 90s and incarcerated all these people. I mean, that was a shame. And it wasn't just conservatives, it was liberals, it was preachers, it was everybody, because the problem back in that day was the drug problem, and everybody was nervous and scared. There was a lot of crime. So it wasn't just, it was united on that issue. So anyway, that's what I feel. But I like everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for that, Ron. I'm seeing the lack of response. I'll go on to the next one. And this is about the coalition.
You have one person besides Ron. You have Kayleen. Yeah.
Okay. Kayleen. Very good.
Yeah, I can share it. Yeah, it's kind of a courageous question to ask or answer. Yeah, I think as I'm learning to see the humanity in people, I could definitely see how people might feel that way, or and I guess for me, it's, only Van and, everybody making the film and knows his heart and intention. And I think there's a lot of good and positive that came out of this film. And I guess it doesn't matter. I think it's things like that sometimes we get really hung up on, or sometimes we're just hurting or reactive. So I guess trying to see the humanity, and we're all people and none of us are perfect. And so I guess that's my response.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kayleen. I'll say for myself that, it did cross my mind that, hey, we're spending an awful lot of time on this one guy, but I thought it was necessary because you had to see how difficult it was, how much courage he had to show to persevere in the face of all that opposition, left and right. So in the end, I thought that editorial or directorial choice of featuring him was spot on. It was necessary. No further participants want to jump in, I'll move on to the next one. And it's about the coalition, the LA and West Virginia. One of the members backed out of the meeting with Trump because he felt that his involvement, and this is a coalition member, in various organizations couldn't tolerate that appearance. Do you feel that that kind of purity in politics is helpful or harmful in regards to achieving your cause? I think this kind of a question, it depends on whether you're looking in the organization internally, or whether you have the ability to look and see the organization with relation to the rest of the community. You can hurt yourself, I think, but maybe it's a necessary thing internally with the way the organization works. Anybody want to speak on that? Oh, Luke.
Yeah,
Come
I
to
do
the rescue.
remember. I can't remember the name of the person, but I do remember him being featured in the film, and it seemed like a conscious choice to focus on his story and his reasons for not going to lobby for the bill. And so I think Lance probably had some really conscious thought about providing his perspective. And I think he really, what I remember was that he was doing what he felt was going to be best for his movement and his purposes. And so I really respect his decision, and I'm glad other people were able to step up for the meeting with Trump.
Yeah. Anybody else on that? Oh, good, Michelle.
Just to reiterate, I think it goes to roles. I mean, it's kind of a luxury that he got to stand on principle because there were other people who could fill the role of going. So I admire him for standing on principle, and I admire the people who went to take the fight on. They both are needed.
Wow, good point. If nobody else, I'll turn over the proceedings to Donna.
Okay, so Jones brought together folks who were negatively affected by drug addiction in South Central Los Angeles and West Virginia. Why was this effective? I mean, strange bedfellows after all, West Virginia and Los Angeles. Michelle? Oh, no, never, not Michelle. Okay, but Michael, go ahead.
For me, it showed the blindness that addiction takes. It's a human. You know, we are all susceptible to, you know, becoming that person. And I remember there was a specific moment where one of the woman who was she had started like I can't remember exactly what she had started, but she was in like the heroin like rehabilitation space, and they were walking through like an encampment, and she was like, you know, that could have been me, or that could have been us. And you know, I think showing that addiction is race blind, I think was a clear goal of Vans and the broader organization to appeal to liberals and conservatives both. And I think it just kind of destigmatized or just kind of pulled the curtain back on like the extent of this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Anybody else want to talk on this? Yeah, if it's something that happens to somebody that you don't identify with, somebody way over there on the other coast, then it's easier to think of this as a character weakness or flaw. When it's people that you know, then, oh, it's a disease. And so it's important, I think, for various people to have been impacted in different ways that other people can identify with. Molly, you have a point?
Yeah, I think it's also just powerful to have lobbyists from both sides. Like, obviously they were in relation to, like, the individuals were in relationship to each other in this deep way, as was pointed out by other people here and pointed out in the film itself. The woman from LA was saying, like, now we're in relation to each other, but also, like, imagine being a congressperson, having people coming to you from both sides of the political spectrum and clearly so different, and yet working together is probably really powerful for our political representatives as well. So just in terms of change, it's important.
Mhm. Yeah, it's when you've got people from both sides of the spectrum coming to you, it's more difficult to just turn them away or not listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, just what again?
Oh, it's harder to turn them away.
Yes,
You-
to turn them away. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It also, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you want to say something else?
No, I was going to lead into the next question. So go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, you've got the next question, Molly, so
I was going to say that this leads us really nicely into unfortunately, will be our last question. We had to skip somebody who got some really good content, got some really good answers tonight, some really good thoughtful pieces. And thanks to everybody who stayed near the end too. So my question is, to close us out with this question tonight, is how does storytelling play a role in deepening relationships and in gaining power in the film? I know we've already touched on this to some extent. I wanted to just bring it up just because my background in community organizing taught me how important it is to know each other's stories. But again, what is that role that storytelling plays, again, in growing deep relationships and gaining power in the film? And then if you can tie it in, feel free to also answer a second part, which is how these stories help lead to the passage. How do they play a role in leading to the passage of the First Step Act? So that I'm going to put down in the chat here because it's a lot, but those questions, and I'll give some examples of relationships, not that people can think of them, but just to kind of jog your thoughts on this a little. Yeah, go for it, Donna.
Well, it's like at the beginning when I think it was, well, someone asked about the statistics that there's, I think, Ron, that there's so many useful statistics about incarceration, about how the United States compares with other countries. There's so many numbers and facts and figures that could be used, but they're dry. And how much better, and this is what the movie did focus on, instead of statistics, was on people and the people who were impacted, the people who could be impacted by getting this law passed. So we saw the faces, and that made all the difference, I think.
That's huge. We just have a few more minutes here. Oh, Keeleen, great. Feel free. You might be the last or second to last person, but go for it.
I think what stood out to me with the story, yeah, I totally agree with Donna, what you said, just the storytelling. And it's storytelling, it can be manipulative often. And it did not, feel that way at all in this film. It felt really genuine, and just like the heart was, how do we see the humanity in each other and like connect? And that it was through story and shared experience. And I mean, the every single person in the film, whether they're a lawmaker or just a citizen or yeah.
Definitely. And you saw how that one legislator actually said to the person lobbying her, he had told her about his son, sadly. And she said, yeah, I lost my son at, I think, 23, 25. It was really sad, but it was also like a moment of them connecting over a shared tragedy. And it's like, it shouldn't have to be that way, but often tragedy does bring us together, right? Thank you. And Ron, please possibly take us home, although we can maybe take one more, but yeah, Ron, go for it.
Yeah, the first thing comes to mind is stereotyping. It breaks down misconceptions as well, because sometimes we tend to do that with stereotyping, and then the personal stories. It's so personal, and it can tap into people's emotions in a positive way, and it illustrates the impact of the criminal justice system and the potential for reform to positively impact people's lives, and this in turn helps to build momentum And when you can see that, that, you know, they were working together, you know, I know it's not on the same scale as the civil rights movement, but it's a movement in the direction that I think a lot of Americans want to go. And so it could be bipartisan. And as long as it doesn't, how can I say this? The language changes to, you know, them versus us, that type of stuff, but about we, you know, and that's the main thing. So.
Thank you. Well, we're just about at time, just another minute or so. So I was going to just say a response to Len, if Lance, if you want to respond to Len's point in the chat about hearing more of the stories about a successful re-entry into society, that's something that the chat might be good for. And I also wanted to mention, since we're not going to have time for this question, I just wanted to put it out there that one topic that came up in our planning and the moderators planning for tonight was there have been other times when bipartisan legislation was passed because you know, because people work together, right? It came across differences. And I live in Massachusetts now, but years ago when the last time I lived in Boston as well, I had universal health care, and a rabbi actually told me that when they were trying to get it passed, that people across Massachusetts came together from urban and suburban, you know, I think maybe even rural areas, but came together across race and different economic backgrounds to share their stories of not having healthcare. And that's why Massachusetts became the first state under Mitt Romney actually to have healthcare, because people shared it in living room stories and all that. So I'm going to put this in as we're sharing the final film. Feel free to just like drop this if there's other things you want people to check out of times that this was done effectively. But basically the idea here is to say to Lance, I was inspired by this film to think about other ways and other areas, and to hopefully even be involved in them in passing more just legislation in our society in this particular way by bringing people together across differences to make change. So thank you, Lance, for highlighting this really, really important issue in a way that showed that the Braver Angels model is possible for making big change. That's what I think that this film did for me, and I think for a lot of us, is it demonstrated that this is Braver Angels in action in policymaking, you know. So thank you. Well, yes, totally hear that. And we are just, I hear that, Lance, and thank you. It's a lot to cover in just one film. Thank you so much, Lance. We do want to introduce the next film. I want to first say huge thank you to Lance. Thank you to my co-moderators as well, Ivan, Ron, and Donna. And a thank you to all of you who listened and who taught tonight and shared your opinions. I love hearing everybody's opinions and hear the way people were touched. That's really powerful. So, and if anybody ever wants someone, we're going to have Ivan introduce the film. I just wanted to say that if anyone either wants to recommend a film to us, you can feel free to write our team or even drop something in the chat. And also please invite more people. Let's bring more people. This is obviously a little smaller tonight. We like having the intimate discussions too. Feel free to invite more people to discussions down the line in the future and bring friends. Ivan, will you introduce the next film and the date?
Sure thing. For everybody, bring your conservative friends next time. We're going to hit a hot topic next month. It's about the transgender phenomenon. And it was my suggestion, and we're going to change gears a little bit. This is not a documentary, it's a film of a panel discussion. And so we'll see if people react favorably to this kind of a format. But it's all about, the film is called The Trans Teen Trend, Social Contagion ? So it should be really interesting.
And I believe we do have a date for that, I believe confirmed. And I think it is May 18th. Is that correct? Although we will send that out in Braver Angels emails, obviously. Right. I believe it is Thursday the 18th. If someone wants to correct me on that, feel free to. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad this was the first one. That's so great for one of you. Awesome. Well,
so you said there were some
for the night. Thank you for staying to the end, folks, and for those of you who for whom it's early, and go enjoy dinner perhaps, and for those of you who are a few minutes late, I hope you enjoy winding down for the next hour, a few hours before you head to bed. and we'll hopefully see all of you next month. It's always a real joy to see people on here, and y'all are, everyone here who comes to these is really awesome. So thank you for being a community with us.